All right, I'm back. I thought I was back. Now I'm back. I need some sort of writing utensil to point with. We're going to go to phase 3 of the French Revolution, and I call this phase reaction, and I've also written the word directory there because that's the name of the government that takes over after the fall of the Jacobins and Robespierre. So reaction, this is a political term. We talk about revolution when we're going to overturn things that have been in place for a long time, but then we talk about reaction, the pushback against revolution. And the revolution, I talked in my last video. There's this atmosphere, especially in the Republican phase of the revolution, when the Jacobins are in charge. There's this atmosphere of just a runaway train. There's so much going on, and it's all happening at the same time, and so many things to try and track. But there are people who are not happy with all the changes. We talked in the last video, people rose up against the Jacobin Republican government when they introduced de-Christianization. That made a lot of people really angry. There are people who are monarchists who feel like, killing the king, that was wrong. We should never have done that. They want to bring back monarchy. And there are people who maybe want a republic, but they want to return to some order and justice, and they feel like the Jacobins, with their Committee of Public Safety, just being judge, jury, and executioner and unleashing terror and violence was wrong. And many of them have lost people that were close to them who were executed. Well, now they take over. They're empowered. They rise up. And now it's the Jacobins' turn to pay. And many of them will end up being hunted down and imprisoned or executed themselves. They face what's sometimes called a white terror, as the reactionaries are going to take over now. All right, so what kind of government do they form? Well, it's still a republic, although we got to write a new constitution. We're now on the third constitution. 1791, constitutional monarchy. 1793, a republic. And now 1795, we got to make some changes to the republican structure. And so we're going to have a legislative assembly. They call it the Council of 500. And then you've got a 5-man executive, the Directory. They are the directors. And a couple things are remembered about this government, and the pace of change slows down, and they start to actually relax some of the things that the Jacobins had tried to do. So we're going to kind of drift back toward allowing the Catholic Church to function, and we're going to relax a little on the unpopular metric measures that nobody likes. We're going to start to fudge the Republican calendar and maybe go back to some traditional dates. It's kind of a mix, and there's a slowdown of all this revolutionary change. But they're remembered also because they're regarded as corrupt. In fact, in American history, they're associated with the XYZ affair, when John Adams' emissaries to France are told, "We want you to talk to you guys unless you pay us off," and that will lead eventually to what we call the quasi-war, where British and American naval vessels are duking it out, mostly over in the Caribbean. And it's an unpopular government. Well, wait a minute, how are they unpopular? How do they take power then? Well, there's a difference between popular within the middle class, the bourgeoisie, the educated, who have been the brains of the revolution, and being popular on the streets in Paris, because the streets are run by the mob. The streets are the kingdom of the sans-culottes, and they have had a powerful impact on the revolution several times now. Remember, it was the sans-culottes who rose up and stormed the Bastille. It was the sans-culottes, the women, who marched off to Versailles and dragged the king back with them. It was not the leaders and governors and educated people who caught the king when he made a run for it. It was regular people, and they brought him back too. It was the regular people who have risen up and filled the ranks of the French army. So on and on we see, and one more, the insurrection that put the Jacobins in power and made the Republic. That was the sans-culottes, the poor, the mob of Paris. Well, the mob of Paris is not happy with this government. They want their republic back, at least the republic of the radical republic. They want this, but it's not popular with the intellectual class who are trying to govern the country, and it was creating all kinds of mayhem out in the provinces. All right, so the wars continue also, and so this is a government that's still at war with Austria and Britain, and this is where we meet Napoleon. Actually, he's a kind of low-level commander who makes a name for himself during the Republic. He's in charge, or he sort of makes himself in charge, at the siege of Toulon, a French coastal port, and the British Navy is there in the harbor, and there's a royalist army that's grabbed control there, and he will drive them out with his skillful use of the big guns, the artillery. That's his training. He's an artillerist. But he also has Jacobin associations. So when Robespierre and the Jacobins fall, Napoleon gets into a little trouble. He's under suspicion. He's put under house arrest for a couple of weeks. Eventually, they're going to let him out, and they make him a job offer to command against the Vendée, and he's like, he's not that interested. It's not an artillery job, and so he's kind of under a cloud. They scratch his name off the list when he turns down the offer to command troops against the Vendée, and he ends up in Paris, kind of twiddling his thumbs. What do I do next? And do I still have a career? And this is where we're going to insert Napoleon into our story. It's not really Napoleon Day, but the unpopularity of the Directory government leads to an uprising in the streets in October of 1795. And they're coming, and they're attacking the palace. Oh, I don't even want to say it. My French is terrible. Tuileries Palace. I don't know. I tried. Anyway, they're attacking the palace. If they storm in there, then who knows what they will do? And they need an officer who's bold and who's willing to take charge of the National Guard and defend the Directory government. And who's available? Napoleon. Napoleon takes this job and defends the government, and he takes command of the troops against the mob. And he rolls out his big guns, and he loads them with grape shot. Grape shot is iron balls about that big, about the size of a medium-sized jawbreaker, not the giant ones that you can't even fit in your mouth, not the little dinkies. About that big. But you put a sack of those down the mouth of the cannon and fire it, and you've got yourself a giant shotgun. And he unleashes these on the crowd. He fires into the crowd with grape shot. And the way he put it was, I gave them a whiff of grape, or a whiff of grape shot. And, he scatters them like rats. Hundreds are killed, but the Directory is back in charge. And now they've got a general who's their go-to guy, Napoleon. And so they're going to now give him an assignment because they're still at war, and he's off to Italy. He's now got command of troops, and he's successful. He defeats the Austrians in northern Italy, and then it's Napoleon who negotiates the peace. Usually a government tells the general, these are the terms we want you to negotiate with, but instead Napoleon negotiates the peace on his own, and he informs the French government, the Directory, this is the terms I gave. And they have to accept it, because now with his victories, he's popular. They're not. He has influence, and they are kind of reliant on him because of his popularity. And so his next assignment is of his own choosing, and his strategic vision is incredibly broad. He says, yeah, I'm taking the army to Egypt. Off to Egypt. Hopefully this thing doesn't jump up, and it came off the wall once. Egypt would be a rich prize if France can gain control of it and hold it. The Ottoman Turkish Empire barely controls it, but also their enemy, Britain. Britain controls the wealth of India, and the wealth of India is pouring this way up through the Red Sea and down the Mediterranean Sea into Britain. If you control Egypt, you choke off that source of wealth and power that the British are relying upon. And so this is his strategic vision. He takes the army to Egypt. Long story short, because today's not Napoleon Day, the expedition is a failure. Without naval power to match the British, that army can be stranded in Egypt, and that's exactly what happens. And so Napoleon basically makes a run for it. He abandons the army and returns to Paris, and he's on limited time. If word gets out that he's abandoned the army and then the army is forced to surrender, his career's over, and maybe his life too. And his closest associates, including his brother Joseph Bonaparte, say, Napoleon, seize power. You're popular, they're not. You're the hero, they're hated. Just go in there and do it. And so he does this. He follows this advice. The coup of 18 Brumaire, 9 November 1799. Goes into the Council of 500. He says, okay, I'm in charge here. Y'all, let's get to work. The directory is done. And they don't, there's no, oh, here, it's Napoleon. No. Everybody's on their feet, yelling and screaming. There's papers and pens flying, and people are calling for his head. And he basically retreats out of the building. And he collects himself outside. His brother, his close associates, they get with him and they say, we're with you. Go in and do it. Just be bold. So he does. He later describes this as one of the bravest things he does. He goes back in to the assembly with these people who were just threatening him. And he says, all right, if you've had your tantrum, sit down. Let's get to work governing France. And maybe to his surprise, they do. They get quiet, they sit down, and he forms a new government. Away with the directory and its 5-man executive. It's now going to be called the consulate. And he himself is first consul. And, make no mistake, though, the French Revolutionary period of all this change is now going to come to a close, and we're going to have things firmly in the control of Napoleon. And he's both the governor of France, but also a warlord. And so we're going to see that he's going to lead France to empire. Won't last long, but it's going to be an incredible ride. All right, thanks very much, and see you next time.